Have you ever noticed how the silence of a city sounds different than the silence of the woods? In the woods, the silence is empty. But in New York, at 3 o'clock in the morning, the silence is heavy. It is a silence made of millions of sleeping breaths, of humming power lines, and the distant, rhythmic heartbeat of a world made of concrete and steel. Most people believe that to see something impossible, you have to go to the desert, or the deep ocean, or the highest mountain peak. But on a cold November night in 1989, the impossible didn't hide in the shadows. It didn't choose a lonely road. It chose the center of the world. It chose a 12th floor window overlooking the Brooklyn Bridge. Tonight, we aren't just telling a story about a woman named Linda. We are telling a story about the night the city, that never sleeps, witnessed a dream it could not explain. Close your eyes. Let the blankets hold you still. We are going to Manhattan. We are going to the 12th floor, and we are going to look out the window, just as the blue light begins to arrive. Chapter 1. The city that almost noticed. Close your eyes. For a moment, imagine, if you will, the city of New York. Not the city of the midday sun, with its frantic horns and the rushing tide of millions of feet on concrete. No, imagine the city at 3 o'clock in the morning. This is the hour of the blue velvet sky. This is the hour when the great iron pulse of Manhattan slows down, just enough to let the whispers of the wind be heard between the canyons of glass and steel. At 3 a.m., New York is not a city that never sleeps. It is a city that dreams. The streetlights flicker like tired eyes along the FDR Drive. The amber glow reflects off the dark, moving surface of the East River, where the water churns with a secret, heavy energy. High above, the Brooklyn Bridge stretches its steel tendons across the water, a silent sentinel connecting to worlds. There is a hum here, a low, vibrating frequency that you can only feel when the world grows quiet. It is the sound of electricity, of distant steam pipes, and of the collective breath of millions of souls drifting in the shallow waters of sleep. In T-Sur, the city feels impossible. It is a fortress of human achievement, a grid of light and logic where everything is mapped, everything is watched, and everything is a place. There are cameras on the street corners. There are night watchmen in the lobbies. There are taxi drivers circling the blocks like sharks in a neon sea. There is almost nowhere in this city where a person can truly be alone, and nowhere where an event can happen without a witness. And yet, it is precisely here, in the most watched city on the planet, that the impossible chose to arrive. Think of the sheer scale of it. Thousands of windows, like rectangular eyes, stare out from the apartment blocks. Behind each one is a life. Some are deep in REM sleep, their eyes darting behind closed lids as they navigate their own private landscapes. Others are awake. A writer stares at a flickering cursor. A nurse prepares a cup of tea in a dim kitchen. A weary father rocks a restless child. The city is awake, but it is not looking. There's a strange phenomenon in a place as crowded as New York. It is the anonymity of the spectacular. When you live in a place where a man might walk a tiger on a leash, or a skyscraper might be wrapped in silver fabric, you learn to stop looking up. You learn to focus on the 6 feet of pavement directly in front of you. You protect your peace by narrowing your vision. Perhaps that is how it started. Perhaps the city didn't notice because it was simply too busy being itself. But imagine the air above the rooftops. Imagine the space between the 12th floor and the stars. At 3 a.m. on this particular night, the air began to change. It didn't change with a bang or a flash. It changed with a shimmer, a subtle shift in the density of the night. If you were standing on the Brooklyn Bridge at that moment, looking toward the skyline of the Lower East Side, you might have felt a sudden chill. Not the chill of the November wind, but a coldness that felt older. The stars didn't move, but for a moment, they seemed to dim, as if something much larger had stepped in front of the light. In an apartment on the 12th floor, overlooking the river, a woman lay sleeping. Her name is Linda. Though at this moment, she is simply a dreamer. She is an ordinary woman in an extraordinary city. Her life is built of the things we all know. The scent of morning coffee, the sound of the subway rattling the floorboards, the warmth of a husband's breath in the dark. She is a thread in the great tapestry of the city, no more or less important than the millions of others. But tonight, the tapestry is about to be pulled. Think about the silence of a bedroom at night, The way the shadows of the window frames stretch across the floor like long, dark fingers. The way the digital clock glows with a soft, neon heartbeat. To Linda, this room is the safest place in the world. It is the anchor of her reality. But reality is a fragile thing. It is a thin veil draped over a much larger, much deeper ocean of the unknown. Tonight, the veil is thinning. Was there a sound, a low-frequency thrum that rattled the glass in the frames? Or was it a silence so heavy that it felt like a weight on the chest? In the city below, a taxi driver on the FDR Drive glanced out his side window. He saw the bridge, he saw the water, and for a split second, he saw a flicker of blue. A light that didn't belong to a police car or a neon sign. It was a blue, the color of a dying star. Soft and electric all at once. He blinked, shook his head, and pressed his foot on the accelerator. Just another trick of the light, he told himself. Just another New York minute. But it wasn't a trick. High above him, the air was beginning to glow. The bricks of the apartment building, weathered by decades of salt and soot, were being bathed in a luminosity that had no source. It was as if the night itself were becoming liquid. If we could pull back, way back, and look at the city from the clouds, we would see Manhattan like a giant circuit board, pulsing with orange and white light. And there, tucked away near the edge of the river, we would see one tiny, brilliant spark of blue. It is a pinprick in the map, a glitch in the system. The city is awake, but it is dreaming. And in that dream, the rules of gravity, of solid walls, and of possible and impossible are starting to dissolve. What does it feel like when the world, begins to slip away? It doesn't happen with a scream. It happens with a whisper. It happens in the space between two breaths. It happens when you realize that the shadow in the corner of your eye isn't a shadow at all. Linda is still asleep. Or perhaps she is in that half-light, where sleep and waking meet. She doesn't know yet that she is about to become the center of a mystery that will baffle investigators for decades. She doesn't know that witnesses, men in suits, drivers on the highway, people with nothing to gain from a lie, will later testify to seeing her. They will see a woman in a white nightgown, floating like a ghost against the backdrop of the skyscrapers. But for now, there is only the quiet, there is only the hum of the city. The Brooklyn Bridge stands firm. The river flows on, indifferent to the lives lived beside it. The city of New York, in all its majesty and all its noise, continues its slow, rhythmic breathing. It is a city that has seen everything, and yet, it is a city that is about to be surprised. As we settle into this story, let go of the need for answers. Let go of the need for proof. Instead, let yourself drift into the atmosphere of that November night. Feel the coolness of the air. Hear the distant siren that fades into the silence. Watch the blue light as it begins to pool on the floor of a 12th floor bedroom. The city is watching, even if it doesn't know what it's seeing. The night is open, the windows closed, but the light is coming through anyway. We are at the beginning of a journey that defies the logic of the concrete streets below. It is a journey that starts with one woman, one room, and one impossible moment in the heart of the world. The city that never sleeps is about to have a dream it will never forget. And as the blue light grows and the silence deepens, the ordinary world begins to fade away. We are leaving the pavement. We are leaving the noise. We are rising, slowly, toward the stars. Rest now. Let the city hum in the background of your mind. Let the story carry you, like a leaf on the river, toward the edge of the unknown. Because tonight, the impossible is just another part of the night. And the night is very, very long. In the next chapter, we will meet her. We will step inside that 12th floor apartment and see the life of the woman who lived there. We will see the mundane details, the photographs on the mantel, the slippers by the bed that make what happened next so very hard to believe. But for now, just listen to the city. Listen to the hush. The city almost noticed, and sometimes almost is the most haunting word of all. Chapter 2. An ordinary woman in an extraordinary city. Before we return to the blue light and the thinning veil of reality, we must first understand the world that was being left behind. To understand the mystery of Linda Napolitano, you must first understand the life of Linda Napolitano. Imagine, if you will, the interior of an apartment on the 12th floor of a sturdy brick building near the East River. It is not a place of high drama or grand design. It is a home. It is a space filled with the gentle, accumulated clutter of a life well lived. There is a specific smell to a New York apartment in the late autumn. It is a mixture of steam from the old iron radiators, that rhythmic clank-clank keys that serves as the city's winter heartbeat on, the faint, lingering scent of a Sunday dinner, garlic, olive oil, and the sweetness of simmering tomatoes. It is a smell that speaks of heritage, of family, and of a deep-rooted sense of belonging. Linda was, by every outward measure, an ordinary woman. She was a mother. She was a wife. She was a neighbor who exchanged pleasantries in the elevator and checked her mailbox with the same rhythmic habit as everyone else in the building. Her world was not one of science fiction or cosmic speculation. Her world was the grocery store on the corner, the laundry that needed folding, and the photographs of her children that lined the hallway. When you look at her life before that November night, you see a woman who is anchored to the earth by 1,000 tiny, invisible threads of routine. There is a profound beauty in routine. It is the armor we wear against the chaos of the world. For Linda, the day began with the sound of the city waking up, the distant rumble of a garbage truck, the chirping of a neighbor's radio. She lived a life of tangible things, the weight of a heavy ceramic mug in her hand, the texture of the floral wallpaper in the kitchen, the soft, familiar resistance of the carpet beneath her feet. These were the things she trusted. This was the reality she knew. Think about your own home for a moment. Think about the objects that surround you as you listen to this, the way the light hits a particular picture frame, the specific creak of a floorboard. To Linda, these were not just objects. They were the boundaries of her universe. Within these four walls, everything made sense. She lived in an Italian-American household where the kitchen was the soul of the home. It was a place of conversation and warmth. In the afternoons, the light would filter through the thin curtains, casting a soft, golden glow over the linoleum. It was a peaceful life. It was a safe life. And then there was her husband. In the story of the Manhattan Abduction, the husband is often a silent figure, but he is a vital one. He represents the ultimate anchor. Imagine him now, a hard-working man, a man of logic and solid ground. To him, the world was exactly what it appeared to be. You go to work. You come home. You love your family. And you sleep. He was the person Linda turned to when the world felt too loud or too fast. Their marriage was a partnership of the ordinary. They shared the small victories and the minor frustrations of city life. They worried about the bills. They celebrated birthdays. And they planned for a future that looked very much like their past. There was no room in their lives for the unexplained. There were no books on UFOs on their nightstands. No interest in the paranormal or the occult. They were people of the earth. People of the city. In The Night Whisper, we often talk about the threshold. Linda was a woman who lived her entire life on one side of that threshold. She believed in what she could touch, what she could see, and what she could protect. The apartment on the 12th floor was her fortress. High above the noise of the FDR Drive, she felt removed from the dangers of the street. Up here, the world was quiet. Up here, she could lock the door and know that her family was safe. There's a specific kind of peace that comes with living high up in a building. You're a part of the city, yet you are above it. You can watch the lights of the bridge and the movement of the river from a place of total security. Or, so she thought. We must emphasize just how unremarkable this setting was. If you had walked past Linda on the street that afternoon, you wouldn't have looked twice. She wasn't seeking attention. She wasn't looking for a story to tell. She was simply a thread in the fabric of New York, moving through her day with the quiet dignity of a woman who knew her place in the world. But perhaps that is why this story is so haunting. If this could happen to Linda, a woman of sauce and steam, of laundry and logic, then it suggests that the extraordinary doesn't choose its witnesses based on their beliefs. It doesn't look for the seekers or the dreamers. It simply arrives. Imagine Linda on the evening of November 29th. It was a Wednesday, a quiet night. The city was settling into its midweek rhythm. She likely followed her usual routine. Perhaps she made a light dinner. Perhaps she watched a bit of television, the blue light of the screen reflecting in her eyes, never knowing that a different kind of blue light was only hours away. She would have checked the locks on the door. She would have made sure the windows were shut against the November chill. She would have smoothed the blankets on her bed, the sheets smelling of lavender or detergent, the scent of normal. There is a tragedy in that normalcy, isn't there? The way we prepare our little nests, thinking we are keeping the world out. We close the curtains to keep the night away, forgetting that the night is not a visitor. It is the very air we breathe. As Linda climbed into bed that night, she felt the familiar weight of the blankets. She felt the presence of her husband beside her, his breathing steady and rhythmic. She felt the safety of the 12th floor. She was an ordinary woman, in an ordinary room, in a city that she understood. But as she closed her eyes, the threads of her routine were beginning to fray. The grocery lists, the family photos, the clanking radiators, all of it was about to be rendered insignificant. The fortress was not as strong as she believed. In a few hours, the woman who only believed in what she could touch would find herself touching the untouchable. The woman who found safety in the 12th floor would find that the height was no protection at all. But for now, let her sleep. Let her stay in this moment of safety for a little longer. Breathe in the scent of the apartment. Hear the distant, comforting hum of the city. Feel the warmth of the radiator. This is the world as we know it. This is the grounded, solid earth. Enjoy the weight of the blankets. Enjoy the silence of the room. Because in the next chapter, the silence will change. The room will grow heavy, and the ordinary woman will realize that the extraordinary has been waiting for her all along. The 12th floor is quiet. The clock on the bedside table ticks away the seconds of the old world. Rest now, in the safety of the mundane. Sleep in the comfort of the routine. The world is exactly as it seems, for just a few more hours. Chapter 3. The moment the room changed. It was the night of November 30th, 1989. Outside, the New York air was biting a sharp, late-autumn wind that rattled the loose panes of glass in the old apartment buildings, and sent dry leaves skittering like tiny claws across the pavement of Cherry Street. But inside the 12th floor apartment, the world was still. The heat from the radiators had settled into a comfortable, dry warmth. The city's distant roar had faded into a rhythmic, oceanic hum. Linda was deep within the layers of sleep. Think of sleep not as a void, but as a journey. When we drift off, we descend a long, winding staircase into the quietest parts of our own minds. We leave the world of light and sound behind, moving into a place where time has no meaning and the logic of the day dissolves. Linda was at the very bottom of that staircase, in the heavy, velvet darkness of a dreamless rest. But then, something changed. It didn't start with a noise. It didn't start with a shock. It started with a feeling, a subtle shift in the weight of the room. Imagine you are floating in a perfectly still pool of water, and someone, somewhere far away, drops a single pebble. You don't hear the splash, but you feel the ripple as it passes beneath you. Linda began to rise back up that staircase of sleep, but she didn't make it all the way to the top. She found herself caught in the in-between. This is the threshold of the night. It is that strange, hazy borderland where you are conscious enough to know where you are, but your body is still anchored to the world of dreams. Educators and doctors call it sleep paralysis, but to those who experience it, it feels like something much more ancient. It feels as though the soul has woken up before the house it lives in is ready to open its doors. Linda opened her eyes, but she could not move. Their blankets, which only hours ago had felt like a warm embrace, now felt like lead. Her arms and legs were heavy, as if her blood had turned to liquid stone. She tried to twitch a finger, to draw a deeper breath, but her body refused to obey. Do not be afraid as you listen to this. In the night whisper, we understand that this stillness is not a cage. It is a pause. It is the moment where the universe asks you to stop, to be completely silent, and to truly listen. Linda lay there, her gaze fixed on the ceiling. The shadows of the room were familiar, yet they seemed different. The darkness wasn't just the absence of light. It felt occupied. The digital clock on the bedside table pulsed with its steady, red heartbeat. 3 o'clock. 3:01. The minutes were passing, but they felt stretched, like taffy. In this state, the ticking of the clock sounds like a drum, and the sound of your own heartbeat becomes a rhythmic tide against your ears. Thump hush. Thump hush. Beside her, Her husband remained in the deep world. She could hear the soft, rhythmic whistle of his breath, the sound of the ordinary world continuing just inches away from her. He was the anchor, the proof that the room was still real. And yet, the distance between his side of the bed and hers felt like a vast, impassable canyon. He was in the daylight world of sleep, while she was standing on the edge of something else entirely. Then, the silence of the room changed. Have you ever been in a room where the air suddenly feels charged? Like the moment before a summer thunderstorm breaks, when the hair on your arm stands up and the very oxygen seems to hum with static electricity. That was the feeling that began to pool around Linda's bed. The air grew cold. Not the cold of a drafty window, but a clean, sterile cold, the kind of cold you find in the high reaches of the atmosphere, or in the spaces between the stars. She realized then that she was not alone. There is a sense we all have, a sixth sense that doesn't belong to our eyes or our ears. It is the sense of presence. You know it when someone is standing behind you in a crowded room, even if they haven't made a sound. It is a pressure on the psyche, a ripple in the personal space we carry around us. Linda felt that pressure now. It was coming from the foot of the bed. She couldn't turn her head. She couldn't cry out. She could only watch the shadows at the edge of her vision. The room, her safe fortress on the 12th floor, was no longer just hers. The boundaries had been breached. But strangely, as the awareness of another presence grew, the initial spike of panic didn't explode. Instead, it was met by a wave of unnatural calm. It was as if a hand had been placed over her heart, slowing its beat. A voice, not a sound in the air, but a thought in her mind, seemed to whisper for her to be still, to watch, to wait. The city outside seemed to vanish. The hum of the FDR drive, the distant clank of the radiators, the whistle of the New York wind, all of it was muffled, as if someone had wrapped the entire apartment in a thick, insulating layer of cotton. There was only the room. There was only the stillness, and there was the growing light. It started as a faint shimmer near the window, a pale, ghostly blue that didn't cast shadows the way a lamp does. It was a light that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. It danced across the floral wallpaper, turning the pink roses into shades of silver and ash. It spilled across the carpet, moving toward the bed like a slow-moving tide. In this moment, the sense of the story shifts. The ordinary woman is no longer in an ordinary room. She is in a temple of the unknown. The mundane objects of her life, the jewelry box, the stack of magazines, the glass of water on the nightstand, all of them were still there. But they looked like artifacts from a world she was slowly leaving behind. Linda lay in the center of this transformation. She was the witness. The air was now vibrating. It was a low-frequency hum, so deep that she felt it in her bones rather than hearing it with her ears. It was the sound of power. It was the sound of a great machine idling just outside the reach of the human eye. And then, the shadows at the foot of the bed began to resolve. They didn't jump out. They didn't move with the jerky motion of a dream. They simply became. Out of the thick, blue-tinged darkness, shapes began to form. They were small at first, barely taller than the mattress. They stood in the stillness, perfectly composed, as if they had always been there, waiting for the right frequency of the night to reveal them. Linda's breath was shallow. Her eyes were wide. This was the moment the world broke open. This was the moment the 12th floor became a bridge between two worlds. If you are listening to this and feeling the weight of your own blankets, let that weight comfort you. Feel the safety of your own stillness. Like Linda, you're in a place of quiet observation. There is no need for action. There is no need for fear. There is only the wonder of the shift. The room has changed. The veil has been lifted. The ordinary life of laundry and groceries, of city streets and subway rides, has been paused. In the silence of that November night, a conversation was beginning, one that didn't require words. A meeting was taking place between the daughter of the earth and the wanderers of the stars. The blue light is growing now. It is filling the corners of the room, erasing the shadows, turning the familiar into the fantastic. The hum is growing stronger, a steady, reassuring pulse that says, you are seeing, you are remembering, you are not alone. Linda Napolitano, the ordinary woman from the 12th floor, was no longer just sleeping. She was waking up to a reality that most of the world would never know. Close your eyes now. Imagine that blue light at the foot of your own bed not as something strange, but as a soft night light for the soul. Let the hum of the universe lull you deeper into your own rest. The room has changed, but you are safe within the story. In the next chapter, we will look closer. We will see the faces of those who stood in the blue light. We will hear the silent thoughts they shared with a woman who couldn't move. And we will begin to understand why they came to Manhattan, of old places, on this cold November night. But for now, stay in the shimmer. Stay in the stillness. The moment has arrived, and the night is just beginning to reveal its secrets. Chapter 4. The visitors at the foot of the bed. The blue light had now fully claimed the room. It was no longer a flicker or a shimmer. It was a physical presence, a liquid atmosphere that seemed to have replaced the very air Linda breathed. And within that light, the shadows had finally taken shape. They stood at the foot of her bed, 3 small figures, silhouetted against the glowing window. When we think of the unknown, our minds often jump to fear. We imagine jagged edges and harsh sounds. But as Linda lay there, pinned to her mattress by the invisible weight of the night, she didn't see monsters. She saw something that looked delicate, something that looked like it was made of the same silver-gray mist that clings to the river on a cold morning. They were small, barely reaching the height of the bed frame. Their bodies were slender, with long, graceful limbs that moved with a fluidity that was almost hypnotic. They didn't walk so much as they drifted, their feet barely making contact with the floral carpet. Their heads were large, shaped like smooth, inverted pears, and their skin, if you could call it, that seemed to have a soft, matte texture, like the surface of a river stone worn smooth by 1,000 years of water. And then, there were the eyes. In the stories we tell, eyes are the windows to the soul. But these eyes were different. They were large, dark pools of liquid obsidian, stretching toward the sides of their heads. They didn't have pupils or irises that Linda could discern. They were simply deep, endless wells of blackness. But as she looked into them, the panic that had been simmering in her chest began to dissipate. It was replaced by a strange, cool sensation. Have you ever stepped out of the summer heat and into a quiet, stone cathedral? That sudden drop in temperature, that immediate sense of hushed reverence. That was what Linda felt as she locked eyes with the figure in the center. They didn't speak. Not with voices, at least. There was no movement of a mouth, no vibration of air. Instead, the thoughts arrived in her mind like soft echoes in a quiet hallway. Do not be afraid, the thought whispered. We are here. You are safe. It wasn't her own voice, and yet it felt more intimate than any spoken word. It was a knowing. It was as if the boundary between her mind and theirs had become a bridge. She felt a sense of immense curiosity coming from them, a clinical, calm interest that felt more like a doctor's care than a predator's gaze. They were observers. They were travelers who had stopped at this particular 12th floor apartment to check on a world they had been watching for a very long time. But while this cosmic meeting was unfolding, the most surreal part of the scene was happening right beside her. Her husband, Steve, lay just inches away. He was the picture of human peace. His arm was draped over the side of the bed, his chest rising and falling in the slow, rhythmic cadence of deep sleep. He was so close that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. To any observer, they were just a couple asleep in Manhattan. And yet, he was 1,000 miles away. In the Night Whisper, we think of this as the separation of realities. It is a moment where two people share the same space, but inhabit different universes. For Steve, the night was dark, quiet, and ordinary. For Linda, the room was a luminous blue stage where the laws of physics had been suspended. She tried to reach out to him. In her mind, she was screaming his name, trying to shake his shoulder, trying to wake him so he could see what she was seeing, but her body remained a statue. The visitors didn't seem bothered by his presence. They didn't fear him. To them, he was part of the landscape, like the dresser or the television, a sleeping inhabitant of a slower world. The figures began to move closer. The one in the center drifted around to the side of the bed. It moved with a precision that was almost mathematical. It reached out a hand along, 3-fingered hand, and hovered it just inches above her forehead. Linda felt a sensation of warmth. It wasn't heat, but a feeling of alignment, as if a humming tuning fork had been placed against her skin. The low-frequency vibration she had heard earlier grew louder, filling her skull with a sound like a swarm of bees, but a gentle swarm of golden, honeyed sound that smoothed out the jagged edges of her consciousness. Peace. The thoughts came again. We are remembering. What did they mean? What were they remembering? In that moment, images began to flash behind Linda's closed eyelids. She didn't see the room anymore. She saw the city from a great height. She saw the grid of lights, the winding river, and the vast, dark expanse of the ocean beyond. She saw the earth as a living, breathing organism, pulsing with its own secret rhythms. She felt a connection to the planet that she had never felt while walking its streets. She felt the fragility of the air and the depth of the water. It was a download of information, a gift of perspective given to an ordinary woman in the middle of a November night. The visitors were not there to hurt her. They were there to bridge the gap. Around them, the room continued to dissolve. The walls of the apartment seemed to lose their solidity. The floral wallpaper began to shimmer and fade, replaced by the brilliant, glowing blue of the light outside the window. The clanking of the radiators was gone. The hum of the city was gone. There was only the blue. There was only the stillness. There was only the connection. If you are listening to this, feel the stillness in your own room. Feel the way your own thoughts can drift away from the world of bills and chores and move toward the vast, quiet space of the stars. Like Linda, you are safe in this moment. The visitors of your own dreams are not to be feared. They are simply the parts of your mind that remember how big the universe really is. Linda looked at the being beside her. She saw no malice in those dark eyes. She saw a reflection of the infinite. She realized that the abduction wasn't a kidnapping. It was an invitation. It was a call to look beyond the 12th floor, beyond the city streets, and into the heart of the mystery. The being's hand moved from her forehead to her chest. The warmth spread. Her heartbeat, which had been racing, slowed down until it matched the rhythmic pulse of the blue light. Thump. Pulse. Thump. Pulse. She was ready. The fear had been washed away, replaced by a profound, heavy calm. She looked one last time at her sleeping husband, a silent goodbye to the world of the ordinary. She felt the blankets begin to lift away from her body, not because of a wind, but because gravity itself was letting go. The room was no longer a room. It was a doorway, and at the foot of the bed, the visitors stood as guides, waiting to lead the woman from Manhattan into the sky. Breathe in the blue light. Feel the weightlessness of your own spirit as you prepare to drift off. The world of the 12th floor is fading. The stars are waiting. The city is below us now, a carpet of orange jewels in the dark. In the next chapter, we will leave the apartment. We will feel the cool night air as Linda passes through the solid glass of her window, rising like a prayer above the skyline. We will see what the witnesses on the ground saw. Woman in white, ascending into the heart of the mystery. But for now, just drift. The visitors are with you. The light is soft. The night is kind. Rest in the blue. Rest in the calm. You are exactly where you need to be. Chapter 5. The blue beam and the window. The world of the bedroom was now a memory, though Linda could still see the outline of her dresser and the sleeping form of her husband. They had taken on a translucent, ghostly quality. The only thing that felt real, the only thing that felt solid, was the light. It was a blue that does not exist in the natural world. It was deeper than the ocean at midnight, yet brighter than the heart of a flame. It did not shine on things. It seemed to shine through them. And as Linda felt her body lift from the mattress, she realized that this light was not just a color. It was a bridge. It was a column of focused energy that had reached down through the layers of the atmosphere to find her. Specifically her, on the 12th floor of a brick building in Manhattan. There is a moment in the transition between earth and sky where the mind struggles to keep up with the body. We are creatures of gravity. We are born to the soil, tethered to the ground by the weight of our bones in the constant pull of the planet. To leave that pull is to leave the very definition of being human. Linda felt the air around her grow dense, like cool water. As she rose, the blankets fell away, sliding off her as if they no longer recognized her as a physical object. She was dressed only in her white nightgown, a thin layer of cotton that now fluttered in a breeze that shouldn't have existed in a closed room. She was drifting toward the window. The window was the boundary. It was the thin sheet of glass that separated the warmth of her home from the freezing, chaotic expanse of the New York night. Under any other circumstances, hitting that glass would mean a shattered pane and a terrible fall. But as the blue beam pulled her closer, the glass didn't look like an obstacle. It looked like a liquid. Think of the way a drop of ink moves through a glass of water. Think of the way a shadow passes over a wall. As Linda reached the window, she didn't feel the cold of the glass or the hardness of the frame. She felt a momentary tingle, a static charge that danced across her skin like 1,000 tiny needles. And then she was through. She had passed through the solid matter of her home as if she were made of light herself. Now, imagine the perspective. Suddenly, the 12th floor apartment was behind her. The safety of the walls, the warmth of the radiator, and the sleeping anchor of her husband were all on the other side of a barrier she could no longer cross. She was suspended in the open air, 300 feet above the pavement of Cherry Street. But there was no fear. The blue beam held her with the tenderness of a mother holding a child. It wrapped around her, a glowing cocoon that shielded her from the biting November wind. Inside the beam, the air was still and strangely quiet. Outside the beam, the world was a whirlwind of motion. Below her, the city of New York stretched out like a map made of fire. At 3 a.m., the grid of Manhattan is a spectacular sight. The orange glow of the high-pressure sodium streetlights creates a network of veins that pulse with the remaining life of the night. She could see the FDR Drive, a long, winding ribbon of gray concrete where a few lonely taxis sped along, their headlights looking like twin stars cutting through the dark. She was rising. The 12th floor fell away, then the 15th, then the roof of the building. She was higher than the water towers. She was higher than the antennas. She was moving upward into a space where only the birds and the helicopters belong. And as she rose, she saw at the source of the light, hovering silently above the East River, near the majestic span of the Brooklyn Bridge, was the craft. It didn't look like a machine of nuts and bolts. It looked like an oval of pure, dark silver, a polished pebble from the stars. It didn't make a sound. It didn't have engines that roared or wings that beat the air. It simply existed in the space it occupied, as if it had carved a hole in the night. The blue beam was an umbilical cord, connecting the woman in the white nightgown to the silent giant in the sky. And the night whisper. We pause here to consider the witnesses, because this is what makes Linda's story so different from a dream. Imagine you are a driver on the FDR Drive. You are tired. You are thinking about your warm bed or the shift you just finished. You glance up past the windshield, toward the apartment blocks near the bridge. And you see it. You see a beam of electric blue light stretching from a window to a craft in the sky. And inside that beam, you see 4 figures. 3 small, gray forms, and 1 woman in white. They are rising slowly, with a grace that defies every law of physics you have ever learned. They are not falling. They are ascending. They look like a painting come to life. A surrealist masterpiece hung against the backdrop of the New York skyline. There were witnesses that night, men in high-ranking positions, people whose jobs require them to be observant, to be logical, and to be truthful. They sat in their cars, their engines idling, their mouths agape, watching a woman float through the air as if the sky were her natural home. They saw the nightgown fluttering. They saw the blue glow reflecting off the steel cables of the Brooklyn Bridge. They were seeing the impossible, and for a moment, the entire city of New York held its breath. But for Linda, the witnesses didn't exist. There was only the ascent. As she moved higher, the sounds of the city began to change. The distant sirens and the rumble of the bridge traffic were replaced by a high-pitched, melodic ringing. It sounded like crystal glasses being rubbed by a giant finger. It was a sound that resonated in her teeth, in her chest, in her very soul. She looked down at her hands. They were glowing. The blue light had permeated her skin, making her translucent. She could see the faint outline of her bones, not as something skeletal or frightening, but as something beautiful like the internal structure of a leaf held up to the sun. She was becoming part of the light. The Brooklyn Bridge was now far below her. Its grand arches and intricate web of cables looked like a toy. The East River was a dark, shimmering snake winding its way through the concrete jungle. The Statue of Liberty was a tiny, green spark in the distance, holding her torch up to a sky that had finally decided to answer back. Linda felt a sense of profound expansion. In her apartment, she was a wife, a mother, a resident of the 12th floor. But here, in the beam, she was a citizen of the universe. The boundaries of her life had dissolved along with the walls of her room. She was no longer limited by the ordinary. She was being invited into the infinite. The craft was closer now. She could see the texture of its hulless surface that seemed to ripple like liquid mercury. There were no rivets, no seams, no signs of human manufacture. It was a single, perfect object, as if it had been grown rather than built. The bottom of the craft began to open. It didn't slide or creak. An iris of light simply appeared in the center of the silver oval. It was a golden white light, a warm contrast to the electric blue of the beam. It looked like the sun was hidden inside the belly of the craft, waiting to welcome her. As she reached the threshold of the opening, Linda looked back one last time. She saw the city of New York, her home, her world, the place where she had lived every moment of her life. It looked small. It looked fragile. It looked like a beautiful, glowing jewel resting on the edge of a dark, cold sea. She felt a surge of love for it, for the people sleeping in their beds, for the taxis on the bridge, for the radiators clanking in the dark. And then she was inside. The blue beam vanished. The iris closed. The sky above Manhattan was empty once again. The witnesses on the FDR drive blinked. They rubbed their eyes. They looked at each other, wondering if they had all shared the same hallucination. The bridge remained. The river flowed. The city continued its slow, rhythmic breathing. But on the 12th floor, an apartment was now empty. A bed was half occupied, and in the sky above the bridge, a story had just begun that would never be forgotten. Breathe in the cold, night air of the city. Feel the height. Feel the weightlessness. Let the blue light fade into the warm, golden glow of your own rest. You have left the ground. You are safe in the sky. The city is below you, and the stars are all around you. In the next chapter, we will step inside the craft. We will see the corridors of light and the rooms made of shadow. We will hear the messages that the visitors had for Linda and through her, for all of us. But for now, just float. You are in the heart of the mystery. You are rising. You are light. Chapter 6. Inside the oval craft. The transition from the open sky to the interior of the craft was not a jarring one. There was no sound of a heavy door sealing shut, no hiss of pressurized air, and no mechanical clank. Instead, as Linda passed through the golden white iris at the base of the ship, the world simply softened. Imagine stepping into a room where every surface is made of frozen light. Inside the craft, the sharp, biting chill of the New York November was gone. It was replaced by a temperature so perfect that it felt like she wasn't breathing air at all, but rather a gentle, invigorating mist. The atmosphere was lightly scented, not with chemicals or metal, but with something organic and clean, reminiscent of ozone after a rainstorm or the scent of the ocean miles from the shore. Linda found herself standing, though her feet felt as if they were resting on a cloud. The floor beneath her was not solid in the way we understand it. It was a pearlescent material, slightly yielding and warm to the touch. It didn't have seams or bolts. The floor flowed into the walls, and the walls curved upward into the ceiling in one continuous, graceful sweep. It was as if she were standing inside the shell of a giant, glowing egg. There were no light fixtures. The light seemed to emanate from the very molecules of the walls themselves. It was a soft, diffused glow, a spectrum of pale violets and warm ambers that pulsed slowly, like the steady breath of a living creature. The three small beings stood around her. In this environment, they looked even more at home. Their gray skin caught the ambient light, shimmering with a faint, metallic luster. They moved with a quiet efficiency, their long fingers gesturing toward a central area of the room. Be still, the thought arrived in her mind, more resonant now that they were within their own domain. The journey is short, the understanding is long. Linda looked around, her eyes wide with a curiosity that had finally overtaken her fear. This was not the flying saucer of the movies. There were no flashing buttons, no tangled wires, no screens displaying maps of the galaxy. Instead, the technology looked biological. In the center of the room, there were several pedestals that seemed to grow out of the floor like stalagmites. Atop them were glowing spheres that changed color as the beings passed near them. It was a place of profound order. It was a place of immense silence. But it was not an empty silence. It was a silence that felt full, as if the very walls were recording her thoughts, her heartbeat, and the frantic, beautiful energy of her human soul. Linda felt as though she were being read, not with judgment, but with a deep, ancient recognition. One of the beings stepped closer. In its hand, or what served as a hand, it held a small, crystalline object. It glowed with a soft, green light. As the being held it up, Linda saw images begin to project into the air around her. They weren't flat pictures. They were three-dimensional memories, hanging in the space like ghosts. She saw the East River again, but this time, she saw it as the beings did. She saw the flow of the currents, the heat signatures of the fish below the surface, and the way the city's pollution clung to the water like a dark shroud. She saw the trees in Central Park, their root systems glowing with a faint, interconnected light. She saw the city not as a collection of buildings, but as a fragile, struggling ecosystem. The message was clear, though no words were spoken. They were showing her the world she had left behind, the world she took for granted. And they were showing her its beauty and its vulnerability. "You are part of the whole," the collective thought whispered. "The stone, the water, the breath, and the star, all are one thread." Linda felt a strange sensation in her chest, a mixture of immense sadness and overwhelming love. In T's craft hovering above Manhattan, she was being given the perspective of a god. She saw the interconnectedness of all things. She saw how every choice made on the streets below rippled out into the atmosphere and beyond. The beings moved around her in a ritualistic dance. They touched her arms, her shoulders, and her forehead with their cool, slender fingers. Each touch felt like a spark of data being transferred. They were studying her, yes, but they were also tuning her. Have you ever felt your mind suddenly clear, like a fog lifting from a valley at sunrise? That was what Linda felt. The anxieties of her life, the bills, the laundry, the small frictions of being human, were stripped away. She was being reminded of her own essence. She was being told that she was more than a resident of the 12th floor. She was a witness for her species. As she stood in the violet light, the craft began to tilt. Not that she felt the movement, but the walls themselves became transparent. Suddenly, she was looking through the hull as if it were glass. She saw the Brooklyn Bridge far, far below. She saw the headlights of the cars on the FDR Drive, looking like tiny, slow-moving embers. She saw the vast, dark Atlantic Ocean stretching out to the horizon. She was between worlds. She was a bridge herself, a human heart beating inside a starship, a daughter of New York. Floating in the silence of the infinite, the beings retreated to the edges of the room, leaving her in the center of the glow. They seemed to be waiting for her to process what she was seeing. There was no rush here. Time, inside the oval craft, did not tick like a clock. It expanded. A minute felt like an hour felt like a heartbeat. If you are listening to this, imagine yourself in that room of violet light. Feel the weightlessness of your worries. Feel the silence of the craft surrounding you, protecting you from the noise of the world outside. Like Linda, you are a passenger in a vessel of peace. You are being shown that the universe is much larger, much kinder, and much more connected than you ever imagined. Linda closed her eyes and let the warmth of the craft's interior wash over her. She felt the vibration of the ship, a low, melodic hum that matched the frequency of her own resting mind. She was no longer a victim of an abduction. She was a guest of the cosmos. In the center of the craft, under the watchful eyes of the silent travelers, the ordinary woman from Manhattan found something she had never found on the streets of the city. She found perspective. The light began to shift from violet to a soft, sunset orange. The download was nearing its end. The craft was preparing for its next phase. The journey was not over, but the first bridge had been crossed. Breathe in the scented air of the ship. Feel the warmth of the glowing walls. Let the silence of the craft become your own silence. You are safe. You are seen. You are part of the thread. In the next chapter, we will witness the examination. But it is not what you think. It is not a clinical intrusion, but a final, deep communication. A moment where Linda receives a warning and a gift that she will carry back to the 12th floor. But for now, Just float in the amber glow. The city is waiting. The stars are watching. And you are exactly where you belong. Chapter 7. The Message in the Mirror. Inside the oval craft, the light had shifted once again. The violet hues of the corridors had matured into a deep, warm amber, a color that felt like a sunset captured in a bottle. Linda stood in the center of the chamber, no longer feeling like a captive, but like a student standing before a silent, ancient teacher. The being in the center, the one who seemed to carry a heavier weight of authority, approached her. It did not walk. It glided, its movement as smooth as a shadow moving across a wall. In its long, slender hands, it held nothing. Yet as it drew near, the air between them began to shimmer. A screen of light, thin as a soap bubble, and twice as iridescent, materialized in the air. Look, the thought whispered in her mind. Look into the mirror of what is, and what could be. Linda looked. At first, she saw only her own reflection. A woman in a white nightgown, her hair slightly tousled from sleep, looking small and fragile against the backdrop of a starship. But as she watched, her reflection faded, and the mirror began to show her the Earth. This was not the Earth of maps and globes. It was a living, pulsing entity. She saw the great forests of the Amazon, glowing with a deep, emerald heartbeat. She saw the veins of the rivers, silver and winding, carrying the lifeblood of the continents. She felt the breath of the planet, the way the atmosphere swelled and contracted with the heat of the sun and the pull of the moon. But then, the images began to change. The silver rivers began to darken. She saw a thick, oily film spreading across the oceans, choking the light from the depths. She saw the emerald forests turning to ash, the heartbeat of the land growing faint and erratic. She felt a phantom pain in her own chest, a sympathetic ache for the world that was being wounded. The thread is fraying. The being's thought resonated, heavy with a sadness that felt millions of years old. You are the children of the garden, but you have forgotten the soil. Linda felt tears prick her eyes. In the rush of her life in Manhattan, the subway rides, the concrete streets, the endless noise, she had forgotten that she was part of this living thing. She had seen the river as a boundary, not a source. She had seen the sky as a backdrop, not a lung. The being moved closer, its large, dark eyes reflecting the dying forests in the mirror. It reached out and touched the image of a darkened river. Where its finger landed, a spark of gold appeared. The gold began to spread, chasing away the darkness, cleaning the water, bringing the light back to the depths. It is not too late, the thought came, warmer now, like the touch of a sunbeam on a winter day. The balance can be restored, but the witness must remember. The witness must tell the story of the light. Linda realized then why she was here. She wasn't chosen because she was a scientist or a leader. She was chosen because she was ordinary, because she lived in the heart of the concrete, in the center of the noise. And if she could remember the light, then anyone could. The mirror of light began to dissolve, its sparks falling to the floor like dying embers. The chamber returned to its steady, amber glow. The being then did something unexpected. It leaned forward until its face was just inches from hers. For the first time, Linda saw a faint pattern on its skin, tiny, bioluminescent lines that looked like constellations. It placed a hand over her heart, and for a moment, she felt a surge of energy so profound that it felt as if her soul were being recalibrated. She saw her life in New York, but she saw it differently. She saw the kindness of a stranger on the bus. She saw the way a mother held her child's hand at a crosswalk. She saw the flickers of light in every human heart, small and hidden, but capable of becoming a sun. You are the mirror, the being whispered into her mind. When you return to the world of stone and glass, do not lose the amber light. Carry it in the way you walk. Carry it in the way you love. Be the reminder. Linda felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. The weight of the message was great, but the strength she felt was greater. She understood that her life would never be the same. The 12th floor would still be there, the radiators would still clank, and the laundry would still need folding, but she would be folding it with the hands of someone who had seen the heart of the universe. The other two beings returned from the shadows. They began to move in a circle around her, their movements creating a soft, rhythmic hum. The amber light began to fade, replaced by the cool, electric blue she had seen in her bedroom. The examination was over. It had not been an investigation of her body, but an awakening of her spirit. The floor beneath her feet began to feel less solid. The transparent walls of the craft showed the Brooklyn Bridge once again, its lights twinkling like fallen stars. The craft was descending, or perhaps she was simply being prepared to leave. If you are listening to this, feel the amber light within your own heart. Think of one thing in your world that is beautiful, one thing that is worth protecting. Let that thought be your anchor as you drift deeper into sleep. Like Linda, you are a witness to the beauty of the world. You are a keeper of the light. Linda looked at the being one last time. It didn't say goodbye. It simply bowed its head. A gesture of respect from one traveler to another. The iris in the floor began to open. The golden white light of the ship's interior met the blue light of the New York night. She felt the pull of the earth. She felt the weight of her bones returning. But as she began to drift downward, back toward the skyline and the 12th floor window, she didn't feel heavy. She felt like a spark falling back to the fire. The city was waiting. The husband was sleeping. The morning was coming, but the message was etched into her soul, a mirror that would never fade. Breathe out the amber light. Breathe in the cool, quiet air of the night. You are returning to your own world now, but you are bringing the stars back with you. In the next chapter, we will follow Linda as she descends. We will feel the transition as she passes back through the glass and into her bed, and we will experience the first haunting moments of the awakening. The seconds where the dream ends and the mystery begins. But for now, just rest. The garden is safe. The light is within you. The night is a mirror, and you are beautiful. Chapter 8. The Return and the Missing Hours. The descent was not like falling. It was like a feather drifting back toward the earth after a long, high flight. The brilliant golden white light of the craft's interior had faded into the familiar electric blue of the transport beam, and Linda felt the pull of the 12th floor calling her back. As she descended, the air began to change. The sterile, clean scent of the starship was replaced by the familiar, heavy smell of the city. A scent of rain-slicked asphalt, distant exhaust, and the salt of the East River. The temperature dropped, the cool November night air wrapping around her white nightgown like a shroud. The transition back through the glass of her bedroom window was a blur of static and shimmer. One moment she was suspended in the vast, open sky above Manhattan. The next, she was hovering inches above her own bed. With a soft, almost imperceptible thud, her body met the mattress. The weight of the world returned instantly. It felt as if her bones had suddenly been filled with lead. Her limbs, which had been weightless and fluid just moments before, now felt stiff and unresponsive. She lay there, staring at the ceiling, her breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. The room was dark. The blue light was gone. The visitors were gone. Beside her, her husband, Steve, shifted in his sleep. He let out a long, heavy sigh and turned onto his side, his arm brushing against her. He was still the same anchor, still the same solid proof of the ordinary world. But to Linda, the distance between them felt even greater than it had before. He was waking up to a Thursday morning. She was returning from the edge of forever. She reached out a trembling hand and touched the digital clock on the nightstand. The red numbers pulsed in the dark. 4:45 a.m. She stared at the numbers, her mind reeling. When the room had first changed, when the stillness had first taken hold, it had been just after 3 a.m. She had been gone for nearly 2 hours. But in her memory, the experience felt like it had lasted a lifetime, and yet it also felt like it had happened in a single, heart-stopping second. This is the phenomenon of missing time. It is a glitch in the human experience, a gap in the record where the clock continues to tick, but the soul is elsewhere. For Linda, those 2 hours were a void filled with light and messages, a space that her conscious mind was already beginning to struggle to hold on to. As the adrenaline began to fade, a profound exhaustion settled over her. It was not the tired feeling of a long day's work, but a deep cellular fatigue, the kind of weariness that comes from having your very atoms rearranged. She closed her eyes, trying to hold on to the image of the amber light and the dark, liquid eyes of the being. But even as she reached for them, they began to slip away. The logic of the 12th floor was reasserting itself. The clanking of the radiator, the sound of a distant siren, the feel of the cotton sheets. These things were demanding her attention, pushing the impossible back into the shadows. It was a dream. A small voice in her mind whispered, just a vivid, strange dream. But her body knew better. Her skin felt tingly, as if she'd been standing too close to a high-voltage wire. There was a faint, metallic taste in her mouth, and when she looked at the window, she saw a smudge on the glass, a mark that hadn't been there when she went to sleep. She lay in the dark, watching the first hints of gray light begin to bleed into the New York sky. The city was waking up. Soon, the alarm would go off. Soon, the coffee would be brewing, the children would be stirring, and the real world would demand her presence. But as she lay there, she realized that she was a stranger in her own life. The walls of her apartment, which had always felt so solid and protective, now felt like thin cardboard. The city below, which she had always seen as a fortress of human achievement, now looked like a fragile playground. She had been returned to the ordinary, but she was no longer an ordinary woman. The missing hours were not just a gap in time. They were a bridge that had been burned behind her. She could never go back to the person she was before 3 a.m. She was now a keeper of a secret that she didn't fully understand, a witness to an event that the world would tell her was impossible. If you are listening to this, feel the weight of your own body against your bed. Feel the steady rhythm of the clock. These are the anchors of your world. But acknowledge, just for a moment, the possibility of the missing hours. Acknowledge that time is not always a straight line, and that sometimes, in the quiet spaces of the night, we wander further than we realize. Linda watched the sun rise over the Brooklyn Bridge. The orange light hit the steel cables, turning them into threads of fire. It was a beautiful morning. It was a normal morning. But as she finally drifted into a shallow, fitful sleep, her last thought was of the blue beam. She could still feel it, a ghostly tether pulling at her spirit, reminding her that while her body was back on the 12th floor, a part of her would always be drifting among the stars. The return was complete. The awakening was beginning, and the mystery was just starting to take root in the soil of her everyday life. Breathe in the morning air. Feel the solidity of the earth beneath you. You are back. You are safe. You are grounded. But carry with you the wonder of the journey. In the next chapter, we will explore the aftermath. We will see how Linda tried to navigate the days that followed, the strange physical marks she found on her body, and the growing sense that she was being watched not by the visitors, but by her own memories. But for now, just rest. The sun is up. The night is over, but the light remains. Chapter 9. The Physical Trace. The sun rose over Manhattan with an indifferent clarity. It spilled across the rooftops of the Lower East Side, turning the gray bricks of Linda's building into a pale, dusty gold. For the rest of the city, it was just Thursday morning, a day of coffee, commutes, and the predictable noise of a new day. But for Linda, the morning was a foreign land. She stood in her small bathroom, the fluorescent light flickering slightly overhead. The sound of the shower running provided a steady, white noise hum. But she wasn't under the water yet. She was standing before the mirror, her eyes fixed on her own reflection. In the stories we tell ourselves, the impossible is supposed to leave us changed in a way that the world can see. We expect to look into the mirror and find a different person staring back. But as Linda looked at her face, she saw the same woman who had brushed her teeth and gone to bed at 11 o'clock the night before. She saw the same tired lines around her eyes, the same familiar curve of her jaw, and yet there was the mark. She turned her head slowly, pulling her hair back from her neck. There, just behind her ear, was a small, reddish-purple bruise. It wasn't the kind of bruise you get from a fall or a bump. It was perfectly circular, about the size of a fingertip, and it didn't hurt. It felt cold to the touch, a tiny patch of skin that seemed to have forgotten the warmth of her own blood. She touched it, and a jolt of static electricity, sharp and sudden, danced up her arm. Linda pulled her hand away, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She looked down at her hands. Her fingernails were clean. Her palms were steady, but beneath the surface, she felt different. She felt like a radio that had been tuned to a frequency just slightly off the dial. She stepped out of the bathroom and back into the bedroom. Steve was already dressed, sitting on the edge of the bed and pulling on his socks. The room looked so painfully normal. The bed was unmade, the sheets tangled from the night's sleep. The window was shut tight, the latch locked exactly as she had left it. "You okay?" Steve asked, glancing up. "You look like you saw a ghost." Linda opened her mouth to speak. She wanted to tell him about the blue light. She wanted to tell him about the weightlessness, the Brooklyn Bridge seen from the clouds, and the silent visitors at the foot of their bed. She wanted to show him the mark on her neck. But as she looked at him, at his solid shoulders, his familiar face, his simple, grounded reality, the words died in her throat. How do you tell the man who slept through the impossible that the world is no longer what he thinks it is? How do you describe the stars to someone who never looks up from the pavement? "I'm fine," she said, her voice sounding thin and distant, like a recording played from a long way off. "Just a restless night. Too much coffee? Maybe." She began the routine. She made the bed. She smoothed the sheets, but as she pulled the blanket up, she found another trace. Near the foot of the bed, tucked into the crease of the mattress, was a small amount of fine, white sand. She picked up a pinch of it between her thumb and forefinger. It was incredibly soft, almost like powdered silk, and it shimmered with a faint, iridescent glow under the morning sun. It didn't belong in a 12th floor apartment in New York. There were no beaches nearby, no construction, nothing that could explain the presence of this celestial dust. She felt a wave of dizziness. This was the physical trace. This was the bridge between the memory and the truth. If it had been a dream, there would be no bruises, there would be no sand in the sheets. There would be no static in her skin. She quickly brushed the sand into the palm of her hand and tucked it into a small tissue, hiding it in the back of her jewelry box. It was her secret. It was her proof. As she moved through the morning, getting the kids ready, packing lunches, listening to the morning news on the radio, the missing hours haunted her. Every time she looked at a clock, she felt a pang of anxiety. 3 o'clock to 4:45. She looked at the second hand, sweeping around the dial, and wondered where those seconds had gone for her. Were they stored in the being's amber mirror? Were they floating somewhere above the East River? The city outside felt louder than usual. The honking of the horns, the screech of the subway on the tracks, the shouting of the street vendors. It all felt abrasive, like sandpaper against her raw senses. She felt exposed. She felt as though the blue light had stripped away her armor, leaving her too sensitive for the world of concrete. She found herself stopping at the window of the living room, looking out toward the Brooklyn Bridge. From here, it looked so sturdy, so permanent. But she knew better now. She knew it was just a fragile web of steel in a universe that could dissolve it in a heartbeat. She reached up and touched the mark behind her ear. If you are listening to this, imagine the feeling of finding a secret on your own body, a small sign that you have traveled somewhere you weren't supposed to go. Don't let it frighten you. See it as a souvenir, a reminder that you are more than the skin you live in. You are a passenger on a very long journey, and sometimes the journey leaves a mark. Linda spent the day in a trance. She performed her duties. She spoke the words required of her, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept seeing the dark, liquid eyes of the visitor. She kept hearing the silent message, be the reminder. She realized that the trace wasn't just on her neck or in her jewelry box. It was in her eyes. When she looked at people on the street, she didn't see strangers. She saw threads. She saw the interconnectedness that the being had shown her in the mirror. She saw the beauty in the mundane and the fragility in the strong. The ordinary woman from the 12th floor was gone. In her place was a woman who was haunted by the light. As the sun began to set, casting long, purple shadows over Manhattan, Linda felt a strange sense of anticipation. She wasn't afraid of the night anymore. She was waiting for it. She wanted the city to grow quiet. She wanted the radiators to start their clanking song. She wanted to return to the threshold where the impossible was allowed to happen. But for now, the day was still here. The trace was still there, hidden behind her ear, a tiny, cold pulse of the infinite. Breathe in the fading light of the afternoon. Feel the weight of your own secrets, the things you know that the rest of the world has forgotten. You are safe in your knowledge. You are grounded in your truth. In the next chapter, we will see how Linda's secret begins to grow too large for her to carry alone. We will meet the man who would help her make sense of the missing hours, the investigator Bud Hopkins. We will see how a simple letter would change the course of her life and turn a private mystery into a global phenomenon. But for now, just feel the mark. Feel the sand. Feel the bridge between the day and the night. The city is noisy, but you are quiet. The sun is setting, but your light is just beginning to shine. Chapter 10. The Unseen Watchers. As the days turned into a week, the city of New York began to feel different to Linda. It wasn't that the streets had changed, or that the people had become colder. It was that the world had lost its privacy. When you have been taken from your bed, lifted through a solid window, and shown the heartbeat of the planet, the idea of alone becomes a memory. Linda moved through her 12th-floor apartment with a constant, prickling sensation at the back of her neck. It was the feeling of a gaze, one that didn't come from the corners of the room, but from somewhere just beyond the visible spectrum. She would find herself stopping in the middle of the kitchen, a wooden spoon in her hand. Suddenly convinced that the air behind her had gained weight, she would turn quickly, expecting to see a small, gray figure or a flicker of blue light. But there was only the refrigerator humming and the sun hitting the linoleum. The silence of her home was no longer empty. It was expectant. This is the psychological trace. After an encounter with the unknown, the mind becomes a hypersensitive antenna. You begin to notice the things you were always meant to ignore. The way the shadows shift when a car passes outside, the strange static on the television, the way the birds in the park suddenly go quiet all at once. To the rest of the world, these are glitches. To Linda, they were signals. She began to wonder, are they still here? Not in the room, perhaps, but watching from that oval craft that she now knew was tucked somewhere in the folds of the New York sky. She felt like a bird that had been caught, tagged, and released back into the wild. She was back in the forest of Manhattan, but she carried the mark of the handlers. She began to see watchers everywhere. She would look at the people on the FDR Drive and wonder if any of them had looked up that night. She would look at the police officers on the corner and wonder if they had reports in their files of unidentified lights over the bridge. She felt like she was part of a secret society of witnesses, a silent club where the dues were your peace of mind. And then there was the feeling of being watched by the city itself. New York is a place of millions of eyes. Usually, that feels like a lack of privacy. But for Linda, it felt like a failure of protection. How could so many people be so close and see so little? She felt a growing urge to speak, to grab a stranger by the shoulders and ask, "Did you see it? Did you see me floating above the bridge?" But the amber light she had carried back from the craft whispered for her to be patient. The witness must remember. The witness must tell the story. She began to spend her evenings at the window. Steve would be in the other room, the sound of the evening news providing a mundane soundtrack to their lives. Linda would turn off the lamps in the living room, letting the ambient glow of the city fill the space. She would watch the Brooklyn Bridge, its lights reflecting in her eyes like the stars she had stood amongst. She was waiting for a sign, a flicker of blue, a hum in the glass. It was during one of these quiet vigils that she realized she couldn't carry the weight alone anymore. The secret was becoming a physical burden. It was affecting her sleep. It was affecting the way she looked at her children. She was a woman living in two worlds, and the bridge between them was starting to buckle. She had heard of a man who didn't laugh at stories like hers, an artist and an investigator named Bud Hopkins. In The Night Whisper, we think of Bud as the gatekeeper. He was the one who collected the fragments of broken memories and helped people put them back together. He lived in the same city, walked the same streets, but his mind was open to the sky. Linda sat at her kitchen table late one night, the radiator clanking its familiar rhythm. She took out a piece of lined paper and a pen. Her hand shook as she wrote the first words. "Dear Mr. Hopkins, something happened to me on November 30th. As she wrote, the feeling of being watched intensified, but it wasn't the cold, clinical gaze she had feared. It felt like an encouraging warmth. It felt like the beings in the craft were leaning in, curious to see if the ordinary woman would have the courage to become the messenger. She folded the letter and placed it in an envelope. She felt a sudden, profound shift in the room. The prickling sensation at the back of her neck vanished. The air felt light again. By deciding to speak, she had reclaimed her space. If you are listening to this, acknowledge the unseen watchers in your own life. The memories, the secrets, the things you carry that no one else knows. They are not there to haunt you. They are there to remind you of your own depth. When you decide to share your truth, you turn the gaze into a light. Linda walked to the corner mailbox the next morning. The air was crisp, the city was loud, and the sun was bright. She dropped the letter into the blue metal box. The sound of it hitting the bottom, a dull, metallic thud, felt like the closing of a door and the opening of a window. She looked up at the sky. It was a clear, brilliant blue. Somewhere up there, hidden by the light of the sun, the oval craft was waiting. And somewhere in the city, a man was about to receive a letter that would change everything. The watchers were still there, but now, Linda was watching back. Breathe in the morning air. Feel the relief of a secret shared. You are no longer alone in the dark. You are part of the conversation. In the next chapter, we will enter the world of the investigation. We will see Linda sit across from Bud Hopkins. We will hear the ticking of the tape recorder as she begins to tell her story. And we will witness the moment when the world realizes that Linda wasn't the only one watching the sky that night. But for now, just rest. The letter is on its way. The weight is lifting. The city is big, but your voice is clear. Chapter 11. The Investigator's Room. If the 12th floor apartment was a fortress of the ordinary, then Bud Hopkins' studio in Manhattan was a sanctuary for the extraordinary. Imagine a room filled with the scent of oil paints, old paper, and the faint, sweet aroma of pipe tobacco. It was a space where the walls were covered not with floral wallpaper, but with art, abstract shapes, and colors that seemed to challenge the viewer to see the world differently. This was the place where the fragments of missing time were brought to be mended. Linda sat in a deep, leather armchair that felt like it was designed to hold the weight of heavy secrets. Across from her sat Bud. He was a man with a steady gaze and a voice that felt like a warm blanket. He didn't look like a man who hunted monsters. He looked like a grandfather who spent his days thinking about the stars. "Take your time, Linda," he said, his voice a low, melodic rumble. "There is no clock in this room. We are only interested in the truth of your memory." On the table between them sat a small tape recorder. Its plastic reels turned slowly, a rhythmic work-lick that became the heartbeat of the room. Linda looked at the black microphone, and for a moment, she felt the same paralysis she had felt on that November night. To speak the words aloud was to make them real. To tell the story to another person was to burn the bridge back to her old life forever. She began to talk. She told him about the blue light. She told him about the weight of the air. She described the small, gray figures not as aliens, but as visitors, beings who moved with a grace that humans could only dream of. As she spoke, the room around her seemed to fade. The studio, the paintings, even Bud himself became secondary to the images blooming in her mind. Bud listened with a silence that was active. He didn't interrupt. He didn't scoff. He nodded occasionally, his pen moving softly over a yellow legal pad. He was used to these stories, yet he treated Linda's as if it were the first one he had ever heard. He knew that, for the person in the chair, this wasn't paranormal research. It was their life. And then, Linda whispered, her voice cracking, "I saw the bridge. I saw the cars. I was outside, but I was in the air." This was the moment where the Manhattan Abduction transformed from a private memory into a public mystery. As Linda described her ascent over the FDR Drive, Bud's eyes sharpened. He had heard of floatouts before, but never in the heart of the most densely populated city in America. He leaned forward. "Linda, did you feel like you were being watched by people on the ground?" She shook her head. "I was too focused on the light. I was part of it." But Bud knew something that Linda didn't yet. He knew that in his files, there were other letters. There were accounts from people who had been on the Brooklyn Bridge that night. There were testimonies from men of high standing who had seen a woman in white rising through the air. He realized that Linda wasn't just another experiencer. She was the center of a cosmic event that had been witnessed by the very city she thought had ignored her. As the session continued, Bud introduced a technique that would become the hallmark of the investigation: regressive hypnosis. He asked Linda to close her eyes and imagined herself back on the 12th floor. He helped her descend that staircase of memory, past the layers of fear and the filters of the conscious mind, back to the raw, unfiltered truth of the encounter. In the Night Whisper, we think of this process as the unfolding. It is like watching a flower bloom in reverse. The petals of the ordinary are pulled back to reveal the glowing heart of the extraordinary. Under hypnosis, Linda's voice changed. It became clearer, more rhythmic. She described the interior of the craft in vivid detail. The amber light, the liquid walls, the message of the mirror. She spoke of the environmental warning, the download of information about the Earth's fragile state. Bud's pen flew across the page. This wasn't just a story of a kidnapping. It was a story of communication. It was a bridge between species. If you are listening to this, imagine sitting in that leather chair. Imagine a voice like Bud's, guiding you back through your own memories, helping you find the light you thought you had lost. There is a great peace in being heard. There is a profound healing in having your impossible truth accepted without question. By the time the tape recorder clicked to a stop, the sun was setting outside the studio windows. The art on the walls was cast in long, dramatic shadows. Linda felt empty, but it was a good emptiness, the kind that follows a long overdue confession. "You did well, Linda," Bud said, turning off the machine. "This is just the beginning. Your story's going to change the way the world looks at the sky." Linda stood up, her legs feeling a bit shaky but her heart feeling light. She looked at the tape recorder. Her voice was in there now. Her secret was no longer just hers. It was a record. It was history. As she walked out of the studio and back onto the streets of Manhattan, the city felt different once again. It no longer felt like a place of unseen watchers. It felt like a place of unseen witnesses. She looked at the people passing by and wondered which one of them might be the one who saw her. She was no longer an ordinary woman with a strange dream. She was the protagonist of a mystery that was about to break the world wide open. Breathe in the cool evening air. Feel the relief of being understood. You are safe in your truth. You are standing on solid ground, but your eyes are fixed on the stars. In the next chapter, we will encounter the witnesses. We will hear from the men who stood on the bridge, the men who saw the blue beam, and the controversy that erupted when the world tried to decide if Linda was a messenger or a myth. But for now, just rest. The recording is safe. The investigator's watching. The truth is out in the air. Chapter 12. The Witnesses on the Bridge. In the world of the Night Whisper, we often think of mystery as something hidden, something that happens in the dark corners of a room or the deep recesses of the mind. But the story of Linda Napolitano refuses to stay in the shadows. It is a mystery that stepped out onto the most public stage imaginable. The skyline of New York City. While Linda was ascending in that column of blue light, the city was not as asleep as she had thought. Imagine a dark car idling on the FDR Drive, just a few hundred yards from the Brooklyn Bridge. Inside are two men who are not prone to fantasy. They are professional, serious, and trained to observe. In the annals of this case, they are often referred to as Dan and Bobby. They were security details for a high-ranking international statesman, a man of global importance whose name is whispered in the halls of power. These men were sitting in the stillness of the early morning, waiting for their next move, when the sky above them fractured. They didn't see a UFO in the way the movies describe it. They saw a disruption in the very fabric of the night. Looking up at the apartment building on Cherry Street, they saw a woman in a white nightgown. She wasn't falling. She was drifting. She was suspended in a pool of electric blue light, flanked by three small, otherworldly figures. Imagine the silence in that car. Imagine the feeling of your reality crumbling as you watch a human being defy the most fundamental law of our world, gravity. These witnesses saw Linda pass through the solid air as if she were made of smoke. They saw her rise toward the massive, oval craft that hovered like a silver ghost over the East River. They watched, frozen in a mixture of terror and awe, as the woman and the beings were pulled into the belly of the ship. But they weren't the only ones. Further down the bridge, another witness was watching. A woman, driving home late, saw the same blue glow. She described the way the light reflected off the steel cables of the Brooklyn Bridge, turning the iconic landmark into a glowing web of neon. She saw the craft, a silent, metallic giant, simply hang there, indifferent to the laws of aviation or the presence of the city. This is what investigators call independent corroboration. It is the moment where a story stops being a dream and starts being an event. When Bud Hopkins began to receive letters from these witnesses, letters that arrived months apart, from people who didn't know each other, yet described the exact same woman, the exact same nightgown, and the exact same blue light. The Manhattan Abduction became the most important case in the history of the unknown. Think about the weight of that. For Linda, knowing that people saw her was both a relief and a burden. It meant she wasn't losing her mind. It meant the mark on her neck and the sand in her sheets were real. But it also meant that the world was far more transparent than we like to believe. It meant that at any moment, the extraordinary can reach down and pluck us from our ordinary lives, and the only thing we can do is watch. The witnesses on the bridge were changed forever. They spoke of missing time of their own. They spoke of a feeling of profound stillness, as if the entire city had been placed under a bell jar for those few minutes. They described the craft not as a machine, but as a presence, something that felt ancient and powerful. One of the witnesses, the statesman himself, reportedly remained haunted by what he saw from the back of that car. He was a man who dealt in the hard truths of politics and geography, yet he had seen a truth that didn't fit on any map. He had seen a woman rise above Manhattan, and in that moment, all his power meant nothing. In the night whisper, we ask you to put yourself in their shoes. Imagine you are on that bridge. The wind is cold, the river is dark, and suddenly, the sky opens up. You see the blue light. You see the woman in white. You see the impossible. Do you tell the world, or do you keep it tucked away? A secret treasure that you only look at when the room is dark and the city is quiet. The witnesses eventually came forward, their testimonies forming a solid wall of evidence that stood against every skeptic. They provided the mirror that Linda needed. Through their eyes, she could see herself as she was that night. A bridge between two worlds, a luminous spark in the dark heart of New York. The controversy would rage for years. Skeptics would look for wires, for holograms, for any explanation that kept the world safe and logical. But the witnesses stayed firm. They knew what they saw. They knew that on November 30th, 1989, the laws of the world were suspended for a few beautiful, terrifying minutes. As the investigation drew to a close, the story of the Manhattan Abduction became a legend. It became a reminder that even in the most watched city on Earth, there are things that escape our understanding. It taught us that this sky is not just a roof, but a doorway. Linda Napolitano returned to her life on the 12th floor. She continued to cook her meals, to care for her family, and to walk the streets of her neighborhood. But she never walked alone. She carried with her the knowledge that she was part of something vast. She knew that high above the Brooklyn Bridge, the stars were watching, and she knew that somewhere in the city, there were others who had seen the light. Breathe in the vastness of the night. Feel the bridge beneath your feet and the sky above your head. You are part of the story now. You are a witness to the witness. In the final chapter, we will reach the resolution. We will look at where the story sits today, in the quiet corners of our imagination. We will reflect on the legacy of that blue light and the message it left behind. But for now, just drift. The witnesses are silent. The bridge is still. The blue light has faded, but the wonder remains. Chapter 13. The mystery endures. We have traveled a long way from that 12th floor apartment on Cherry Street. We have stood in the blue light, felt the weightlessness of the ascent, heard the silent messages of the visitors, and stood as witnesses on the Brooklyn Bridge. Now, as the stars began to fade into the soft light of a new dawn, we must return to the present. The story of Linda Napolitano didn't end when the blue beam vanished. It didn't end when the investigation files were closed, or when the headlines moved on to the next New York mystery. It lives on in a different way now. It lives in the sense of the city. Whenever someone walks across the Brooklyn Bridge at 3 in the morning and feels a sudden, inexplicable chill, that is the story. Whenever a dreamer wakes up in a quiet room and wonders for a split second if the shadows have shifted, that is the legacy. The Manhattan Abduction remains one of the most debated, scrutinized, and baffling events in the history of the unknown. To the skeptics, it is a puzzle to be solved, a series of coincidences and hallucinations. To the believers, it is a landmark, a physical proof that we are not the only ones navigating the dark. But in the night whisper, we see it as something more. We see it as a reminder of the threshold. We live our lives in a world of concrete and glass, of schedules and logic, of things we can see and touch. But just beyond the edge of our vision, there is another world, one of light and mystery, of ancient travelers and silent messages. Usually, these two worlds never meet. They are like two ships passing in the night, separated by a sea of silence. But on November 30th, 1989, those two ships collided. For a few minutes, the ordinary and the extraordinary became one. A woman from the 12th floor became a daughter of the stars. A bridge made of steel became a bridge made of light. And a city that prides itself on seeing everything was shown something it couldn't explain. What happened to Linda? She lived her life. She carried the amber light in her heart, just as the beings had asked. She became the reminder. She showed us that the impossible doesn't happen to heroes or legends. It happens to us. It happens in our bedrooms, in our streets, and in our most quiet moments. As you lie here now, feel the safety of your own world. Feel the familiar weight of your blankets and the steady rhythm of your breath. The world is solid. The world is known, but keep a small space in your heart for the mystery. The Manhattan Abduction teaches us that it is okay not to have all the answers. There is a profound beauty in a riddle that remains unsolved. It keeps our imagination alive. It keeps us looking up at the sky. It reminds us that even in a city of 8 million people, every single soul is part of a much larger, much deeper story. The city of New York continues to breathe. The FDR Drive hums with the pulse of the morning. The East River flows on, carrying the secrets of the night out to the sea. The Brooklyn Bridge stands firm, its cables singing in the wind. The blue light is gone, but the wonder remains. Linda's story is a whisper across the skyline, a soft, glowing pulse in the heart of the night. It tells us that we are never truly alone. It tells us that the universe is watching over us with curiosity and care. And it tells us that even the most ordinary life can be touched by the infinite. Breathe in the peace of the final chapter. Feel the warmth of the story as it settles into your memory. You are safe. You are grounded. You are home. Close your eyes now. Let the city fade. Let the bridge dissolve. Let the blue light turn into the soft, velvet darkness of a restful sleep. The story has reached its end, but your dreams are just beginning. The 12th floor is quiet. The city is at peace. And the mystery is beautiful. Good night, Manhattan. Good night, Linda. And good night to you, the witness. Sleep well. The stars are watching as the final echoes of the Manhattan mystery drift away. It is time for you to return fully to the stillness of your own room. The journey of the mind is ending, but the journey of your dreams is just beginning. The city of New York has reclaimed its secrets. The blue light has faded into the soft gray of memory, and you, like Linda, are safe within the sanctuary of the night. In the world of the Night Whisper, we believe that sleep is not just an ending to a day, but a doorway to a deeper understanding. Tonight, you have looked beyond the glass and the concrete. You have touched the stars and returned with a sense of peace. Carry that peace with you now. Let the weight of your body sink deeper into your bed. Let the thoughts of the day dissolve into the vast, quiet ocean of rest. There are no more questions to answer. There is no more logic to follow. There is only the silence and the gentle, rhythmic breathing of a world at rest. Thank you for wandering through the mystery with us. Whether you are in the heart of a bustling city or under the quiet canopy of the countryside, remember that the extraordinary is always just a whisper away. This has been an episode of Night Whisper. May your sleep be deep. May your dreams be luminous. And may you wake with the light of the stars still shining in your heart. The night is long. The night is kind. Good night.